where we will just have to agree to disagree, but I think that a rigorous communitarianism would be critical of a liberalism of flourishing as it is of a liberalism of autonomy. It's communitarian and there's some kind of mutual responsibility in the sense that we expect the states to provide these entitlements, and I have a duty to pay taxes. And that's where my responsibility ends in this description. And then I'm free to do what I want to do. I can participate in a social project, I cannot participate in a social project. I can be interested in the state, I cannot be interested in the state. So I don't want to say there's no difference, but I say that ultimately it's very individually focused, and it sounds to me a little bit backpedaling to say, there's an interdependence, because it's a very thin interdependence. It's an interdependence where it's the state which is responsible for the conditions of flourishing. I can fully accept that if you don't flourish, then I will probably be able to flourish less. If I take a humanist and not a material definition of what flourishing is, but it still does not give me any sense of guidance, responsibility, telos, mission of the good life, other than to ensure that I and others can flourish. It's still ultimately very atomistic, very individualist. Here's a different way of saying it, but before I say the different way of saying it, I want to take a little footnote and ask you a footnote question. Where does Israel stand on this paradigm between autonomous liberalism and flourishing liberalism? It seems to me a kind of paradox here, and now I'm not exactly sticking my head out. Not at all. But I want to say that sometimes I think that Israel as a social state is not the worst in the world. And where there are problems with Israel's liberalism, it's actually in the first, very basic, guaranteeing rights, non-interference of the state, etc. So where does Israel actually... So we have Bituach Leumi and we have Kupot Cholim. It's not the best, but it's certainly not the worst compared to other societies. So the way I read the map, and you will correct me, is that Israel gets a kind of kimat tov when it comes to liberalism of flourishing, in terms of the responsibility of the state towards the individual, at least towards the Jewish individuals in the state. But it gets a masbik bekoshi when it comes to the classical liberalism of guaranteeing rights against interference of the state in the private lives, in writing one's narrative. Do I have to give examples? I don't think so.